I call the member for Baulkham Hills.
Madam Acting Speaker, I'm delighted to rise here to speak on this bill, and I must note from the look of the House how we have so many members from the government here interested in infrastructure, but even after the long-winded speech by the member for Mount Druitt, there's still only two and a half members from the government here. Madam Speaker, I'm also identifying the fact that there is great interest from outside of the government in this speech, in this bill, and I must acknowledge the presence in the gallery of the Deputy Mayor the Deputy Mayor of the Hills, who's been walking in and out, Councillor Justin Taunton, who of course represents a shire that has been desperately ignored by Labor's lack of infrastructure spending. And in the gallery, of course, Madam Speaker, is the Mayor of Auburn, Ronnie Wick, who is a fine mayor of that great city, a city that I went to school in, and he also represents the many mayors in New South Wales that have been neglected by the Labor's infrastructure, lack of infrastructure spending. Madam Speaker, the state of the finances in New South Wales are appalling. That is why we need some real management, real leadership when it comes to infrastructure. Madam Speaker, we have the slowest economic growth of any state. We have the slowest jobs growth of any mainland state, and we have the lowest level of business confidence in any state. And I must congratulate you, Madam Speaker, Madam Acting Speaker, on your forthright speech earlier in the day when you identified the 5 major projects that you would like in your electorate. My list, unfortunately, in Baulkham Hills after 16 years of Labor goes beyond 5. I do wish you very well with your ambition to get those 5 projects well. I'm sure members of the government will do everything in their power to ensure you get them. But in my electorate of Baulkham Hills, as the member for Castle Hill is mostly aware, and of course the member for Riverstone and the member for Hawkesbury and the member for Londonderry know that our major ambition in northwestern Sydney is of course the Northwest Rail Link, a $5 billion project, $7 to $10 billion project, which should of course be running by now, but it's not. Unfortunately, because Labor's lack of attention to detail and their re-announcement after re-announcement of that particular project. Madam Speaker, we really need an infrastructure in New South Wales because we need a coordinating body. When any major project is put before the people, before the Parliament, it needs to have a plan. What has happened in the past, and I can speak in my experience as the Chief Executive of the Civil Contractors Federation, a position I held over the last 3 years, and a position I took, Madam Speaker, having consulted with the Federal Minister for Infrastructure, and a man who's well known to the member for Marrickville, when he became the nation's first Minister for Infrastructure. That was trailblazing stuff from a federal government, and one that I've always commended the federal government for doing. We are, despite Labor's opposition in this place, trying to mirror that important attention to detail that has been taken by our federal counterparts. But Madam Speaker, what we do need, and I speak from my experience with the Civil Contractors Federation, is a group that will address the consistent delays in projects. We have had nothing but delay after delay in projects, and we believe here on this side of the House that only an independent coordinating authority will assist in rectifying those delays. We have had no coordination, and I can speak as an industry advocate. We have had absolutely no coordination when it comes to major infrastructure projects, not only between government departments but between levels of government. Ideally, a man like Nick Reiner will be able to bring those government departments and those levels of government together, because no other man but Nick Reiner would probably have the respect from people from both sides of the House, and indeed both sides at all levels of government. Madam Speaker, one of the most frustrating things, having worked in infrastructure for the last 3.5 years, is the continued cancellation of projects. Members of the other side of the opposition would be aware that the high level of regulation they put on business in this state over the course of the last 16 years has made the cost of tendering a very, very expensive exercise. Indeed, it is often noted throughout the industry that up to 10% of a project's cost are mirrored in the cost of putting a tender together. That is a ridiculous cost. It's a cost that's borne by industry and also therefore increases the cost of those particular projects. Hopefully with the certainty that Infrastructure New South Wales will bring, will reduce that cost of tendering, will reduce the cost of doing business in providing infrastructure, and of course we'll give business a little bit more certainty and some more transparency when they're putting their projects together and their tender documents together. One of the other tragedies that we saw over the last 16 years, Madam Speaker, was the continued changing of ministers in this particular portfolio. We had something like 4 ministers for roads in 3 years in New South Wales. That created a great deal of uncertainty, and there was no consistent approach from government, from the public sector, the independent public service, I should say, and that needs to be addressed. We cannot go on with having ministers say one thing, assuring industry about the provision of infrastructure one day, only to have that minister replaced the next day, and all bets are off. By appointing an independent authority like Infrastructure New South Wales, with a man like Nick Reiner, who will be with us for the long run, we will see that the certainty and transparency of the provision of infrastructure in this state will be addressed. One of the other issues that have been raised with me by members of the infrastructure fraternity has been the confusion between governments. We have situations between government departments. We have situations in New South Wales, Madam Speaker, where interpretation of regulation and the vision from government differs from one government department to another. If you're approaching infrastructure in the construction sector on providing a project, putting a project together, the interpretation of things like asbestos differ from one government department to another. The interpretations of plans, and as I said before, the vision can differ between these departments. That needs to be addressed, Madam Speaker, and one independent authority that will be addressed. Madam Speaker, and I'd highlight the entertaining time that those on the government benches had. I refer to you the entertaining time the members of the government benches had during the member for Mount Druitt speech. And whilst he took advantage of the fact that so many of the members of the government are a little bit younger than he is, and probably don't recall the historical significance of some of the events that he addressed, one thing that he didn't address, and we are always judged by the last battle that we've had, and for those on this side of the House, that last battle was the Sydney Metro. We could not understand why a Labor government would spend $5 billion on a metro which was going to be charged to the people of New South Wales at $1 million a metre and then cancel it. That's $500 million that I'm sure the member for Castle Hill and I, the member for Riverstone and the member for Londonderry would have been quite happy to have to commence the proceedings of the North West Rail Link. Madam Speaker, my challenges for the infrastructure in New South Wales and the Hills District are simple. We insist, we demand a North West Rail Link. Why is it that everybody else in New South Wales can have, or certainly metropolitan Sydney, can have easy access to electronic trains, but us? It is time that the northwest of Sydney, the Hills Shire, and those who live in the greater northwestern Sydney area get its rail link. Personally, those in my electorate have lobbied me for a footbridge over the M2 at Windsor Road. We've also sought more commuter car parks for those who are using buses along the M2. And of course, Madam Speaker, who on this side of the chamber wouldn't know how neglected tourism infrastructure has been in this state, hence this government's decision to go ahead with a new convention centre even before it got elected. Madam Speaker, we believe that this infrastructure in New South Wales is an essential. We believe that infrastructure in New South Wales is an essential piece of our vision for New South Wales. I commend it to the House, and I thank you very much for your time.